Hello everyone. Welcome to this course series on Kingdee AI Suite. In this session, we will focus on the Kingdee AI Suite supply chain intercompany settlement system. We will explore the content in 4 parts: product, concept and architecture, key concepts, business process flow and highlights, and core features. Now we start from the first part, product concept and architecture. First, we will introduce the product concept. The concept of intercompany settlement is built on multi-organization collaboration, multi-accounting system, and platformization configuration. It helps enterprises to manage business process flows across various organizations within an enterprise in complex scenarios, simplifies the business process flow of intercompany settlement, and improves the efficiency of intercompany reconciliation. Now we introduce the product architecture. The intercompany settlement system includes basic data settings, the settlement configuration platform, intercompany business types, settlement processing, settlement statements, intercompany transaction documents, and report analysis. Let's look at the second part, key concepts. Here are some key concepts you need to know. We advise you to take a moment to read them to better understand the rest of the course. The third part is business process flow and highlights. Let's walk through the overall process of intercompany settlement. The first process is the configuration of basic data, including accounting systems, internal customers, and internal suppliers. Secondly, each business module supports creation of intercompany business documents and automatic generation of intercompany transaction documents. Then, on the settlement platform, 2 settlement statements are generated based on the predefined settlement configuration, price retrieval rule, and settlement path, that is, AR settlement statement and AP settlement statement. If an AR settlement statement is generated, an accounts receivable will be generated accordingly. Then, the system will proceed to the receipt step. If an AP settlement statement is generated, an accounts payable will be generated accordingly. Then, the system will proceed to the payment step. Now, let's look at the overall flow of intercompany sales. Organization A is responsible for sales, while Organization B is responsible for production and goods issue. Organization A places a sales order to customer K, and Organization B creates the sales goods issue document. The system automatically generates the intercompany transaction document upon approval of the sales goods issue document. Then the intercompany settlement generates the AR settlement statement for Organization B and the AP settlement statement for Organization A. Subsequently, the system generates the accounts receivable, receipt notes, accounts payable, and payment notes. Next, let's look at the overall flow of intercompany purchase. Organization A is responsible for centralized procurement, and the purchased materials are supplied for use by Organization B. Organization A places the purchase order, and Organization B creates a purchase receipt document. The system automatically generates the intercompany transaction document upon approval of the purchase receipt document. Then the intercompany settlement generates the AR settlement statement and AP settlement statement. Subsequently, the system generates the accounts receivable, receipt notes, accounts payable, and payment notes. Next, let's look at the overall flow of intercompany transfer. Organization B transfers to Organization A and creates an intercompany direct transfer order. The system automatically generates the intercompany transaction document. Then the intercompany settlement generates the AR settlement statement and AP settlement statement. Subsequently, the system generates the corresponding accounts receivable, accounts payable, receipt notes, and payment notes. Let's take another look at the overall process for intercompany multi-step transfer with revenue recognition at the time point of issue. When the revenue is recognized at the time point of issue, the system generates the intercompany sales goods issue document and the AR settlement statement for transfer out. Now let's move on to the overall process for intercompany multi-step transfer with revenue recognition at the time point of acknowledgement. When the revenue is recognized at the time point of acknowledgement, the system generates the intercompany sales goods issue document and the AR settlement statement for transfer in. You are now seeing the overall process flowchart of the intercompany multi-step transfer out when the in-transit loss is attributed to the transfer from organization with the revenue recognition time point as issue. We advise you to pause and read this. Now is the overall process flowchart of the intercompany multi-step transfer out when the in-transit loss is attributed to the transfer from organization with a revenue recognition time point as acknowledgement. Next is the overall process flowchart of the intercompany multi-step transfer out when the in-transit loss is attributed to the transfer to organization with the revenue recognition time point as issue. You are now seeing the overall process flowchart of the intercompany multi-step transfer out when the in-transit loss is attributed to the transfer to organization with a revenue recognition time point as acknowledgement. Now is the overall process flowchart of intercompany miscellaneous issues. We advise you to pause and read this. Next is the overall process flowchart of intercompany production pick, return, and replenishment. We advise you to pause and read this. You can see the overall process flowchart of finished product receipts and returns for intercompany production. We advise you to pause and read this. Now is the overall process flowchart of intercompany subcontract production. We advise you to pause and read this. Next is the overall process flowchart of intercompany subcontract overconsumption. We advise you to pause and read this. You are now seeing the overall process flowchart of intercompany settlement of subcontracted operation processing. We advise you to pause and read this. Now is the overall process flowchart of intercompany in-house co-processing operation settlement. We advise you to pause and read this. Next is the overall process flowchart of intercompany asset transfer. We advise you to pause and read this. Next, we move on to a highlight of the system. It supports settlement across multiple accounting models. Multiple sets of settlement statements can be generated based on different accounting models. The internal account settlement prices in settlement statements can vary with accounting models. Another highlight is the configurable settlement platform. The user can flexibly define the transactions for which intercompany settlement processing is required. The system supports configuration of the multi-source price retrieval rule and custom generation schemes of internal documents. The next highlight is the price retrieval rule. The system supports settings of multiple price sources based on different business scenarios. Another highlight is auto-settlement. The system supports configuration of auto-settlement schemes and auto-generation of settlement statements based on the schedule. The next highlight is multi-party settlement. The system supports configuration of multi-party settlement paths and generation of multiple sets of intercompany settlement documents and settlement statements based on multi-party settlement paths. Next, we move on to the last part, core features. First, establish the accounting model. Under the same accounting model, the two organizations involved in the business transaction must belong to different accounting organizations. Only then will the system carry out intercompany settlement. Next is the setting of internal customer. The two organizations involved in intercompany settlement must each be included in the basic customer and supplier data. You need to configure them as the internal customer and internal supplier in the corresponding internal business units. For example, if the supply organization is A and the demand organization is B, you need to respectively create a customer and a supplier corresponding to the internal business units, B and A, and assign or share the internal customer and internal supplier to the other organization. The internal supplier and internal customer follow the same logic. The settlement price list is used for configuration of the intercompany settlement price list. Next, let me explain the price retrieval rule. Before conducting intercompany settlement transactions, it is necessary to first configure the intercompany settlement price retrieval rule. The price retrieval rule supports a variety of price retrieval sources, multiple currencies, exchange rates, and tax rate sources. The price retrieval mode offers flexibility and supports various business scenarios. The settlement path is used to define the settlement relationship between organizations. It clarifies the supply and demand relationships and transaction price rules among organizations in the intercompany transaction process. It is the basis of the intercompany settlement function. The system has predefined dynamic settlement paths for both parties, so that two-party transactions can be done without manual configuration. These paths need to be set if there are personalized demands. Next, let's look at the function of settlement statement creation. Settlement statement creation is the core feature of intercompany settlement. When intercompany transaction occurs, the system needs to perform intercompany settlement. The settlement statement creation wizard helps complete the unified settlement of intercompany business documents, supports generation of corresponding AR settlement statements and AP settlement statements, and supports generation of multiple sets of settlement statements based on different accounting models. AR, AP settlement statements. are documents generated from intercompany settlement statement creation. They are divided into AR settlement statements and AP settlement statements. The system allows you to change settlement prices for AR settlement statements, and such prices will be updated accordingly for AP settlement statements. The AR settlement statement converts to accounts receivable, and the AP settlement statement converts to accounts payable. The auto settlement scheme allows configuration of auto settlement conditions and the time and frequency for auto settlement. Next, let's learn about the function of batch generation of intercompany transaction documents. Intercompany transaction documents will be automatically generated for intercompany business documents that undergo approval. When intercompany transaction documents are not generated due to reasons such as lack of basic data maintenance, this feature supports regeneration of intercompany transaction documents in batches after basic data maintenance, or viewing the reasons for generation failure of intercompany transaction documents. Intercompany transaction document inquiry is used for inquiry of automatically generated intercompany sales goods issue documents, purchase receipt documents, or multi-step transfer outs and transfer ins. Intercompany settlement reconciliation details are used for inquiry of the variance between AR settlement statements and AP settlement statements, and that between accounts receivable and accounts payable. Intercompany settlement profit analysis is used for inquiry and analysis of profitability between intercompany transactions. This concludes the introduction. Thank you.